There also used to be a certain level of joy in going to see a movie that you knew would be dumb, but would be fun. It feels like we've lost that because every movie needs to have a message or has to be a piece of art nowadays. I sort of miss the days when the agenda was just put some star people will pay money to see and have them do fun stuff.
Those were the good old days.
Welcome back to another episode of The Rank. I'm John, and today we're going to be continuing to rank action movies. Now, for those of you that are new to the show, the agenda for this episode is I do the quote notables, which are just a few interesting facts or tidbits that I found out about the film. Then I do the movie overview, which is where I talk about the movie. And then I do the rank, the namesake of the show, where I rank the movie in 10 categories, all to find out what are the best action movies of all time. And today I'm going to be ranking The Running Man, with a screenplay by Michael Bacall and Edgar Wright, which was adapted from the novel by Richard Bachman, who was actually Stephen King, and it was directed by Edgar Wright. So the question is, will the new Running Man be better than the original? I ranked the original last week. Will this one turn out better? Let's get started and find out, starting with the Potent Notables.
Potent Notables.
So as always, the Potent Notables start with the movie's financials. The Running Man came out this past weekend and made $17 million domestically and $11.2 million internationally for a worldwide total of $28.2 million. This is against a budget of $110 million. So this does not bode well. Looks like this is going to end up being a flop, which is kind of a bummer. Also, the numbers that I'm giving you are from Monday, so they're like the Sunday estimates. They're not the actual numbers, which will come out tomorrow. Now, Arnold Schwarzenegger, who according to Glen Powell gave him his full blessing, appears on the currency in this film, which are called new dollars. That's not much of a bone notable, but I just thought it was fun. Edgar Wright told Stephen King to watch Hitman to convince him that Glen Powell was the right choice to play Ben Richards. It's actually a strong choice because Glen is actually great in that, and he feels a lot more like an everyman in that. Now, before Glen Powell was cast, Ryan Gosling, Chris Evans, and Chris Hemsworth all met with Edgar Wright or were considered for the lead role. And prior to developing this adaptation, Edgar Wright actually said on Twitter years ago that The Running Man was the film he most wanted to remake. And finally, the book that this movie is based upon was published in 1982, but takes place in 2025, the year the movie's being released. And the original movie was released in 1987 and takes place in 2017. So that literally is entirely in the past now. Anyway, those are the Potent Notables. Let's go to the movie overview. Now, if you watched or listened to last week's episode of The Rank, you know that I did The Running Man, the original one from 1987, and that I liked it, despite it getting a mediocre rating overall. There's a campiness inherent in watching old Schwarzenegger actioners from the 80s that hit the nostalgia button that this just isn't going to be able to hit, no matter what it does. Even if they put Arnold on the currency in the movie's universe. That currency, by the way, being creatively named New Dollars. Now, just to be clear, I don't care that they were called new dollars. That's fine. And I liked that the slang for them was new, like, gonna get some new. I thought that was fun. Either way, though, this movie had to stand on its own. Now, they tried to replicate Arnie's success once when they did Total Recall, and that bombed, if you recall the one with Colin Farrell. It also just wasn't good. But here's the thing with that one. Everybody loved that story. It was a huge hit. So if you're going to remake it, just do mostly the same story, but with new technology. In this one, they've got a little more leeway as it's a lesser known Arnie movie, and it wasn't a hit. I mean, it's got kind of a cult classic type vibe, but it still wasn't a big hit. And they did take that leeway. Edgar Wright decided to make a movie that more closely resembled the Richard Bachman, aka Stephen King novel, than it did the 1987 movie. Personally, I think this was the right move, because while it was fun to watch Arnie beat up bad guys, there's not really anyone out there right now that has that same kind of appeal anymore. Like, can you think of anyone that you would go, you know what, that movie doesn't look that good, but blank action star is a badass, so I'm gonna go see it anyway. There just isn't anybody. I think that speaks more to the oversized power of Rotten Tomatoes than anything else. And just to say, I do see the benefit in forcing the studios to make better movies. There also used to be a certain level of joy in going to see a movie that you knew would be dumb, but would be fun. It feels like we've lost that because every movie needs to have a message or has to be a piece of art nowadays. I sort of miss the days when the agenda was just put some star people will pay money to see and have them do fun stuff.
Those were the good old days.
Alright, so sorry for the digression. The point I was going to make before I sidetracked myself was that Edgar made the right move. This felt more like I was watching a world than I was watching a star. I do think that Glen Powell has the charisma and look to become a star, but I don't think we live in an age where that's really a possibility anymore. We get some anecdotal exposition about Ben Richards' family and eventually his abundance of barely repressed anger. And if you're going to make a movie about a guy that's going to do some action stunts and fight people, making him angry isn't necessarily a bad thing. We even get a cute bit where one of the many supporting characters tells Ben that he is quantifiably the angriest person to ever audition. What's he auditioning for? Well, he's not actually auditioning for The Running Man. There are a whole bunch of morbid game shows that the network airs. We even get to see one of them where a guy is running on a hamster wheel and has to answer trivia questions, and if he gets them wrong, they make the wheel spin faster. Of course, that guy seemingly dies, so maybe that's not a good one to go on. But this is Ben's big idea of how to get enough money to not only buy real meds for his sick daughter, but also get his wife and daughter out of the slums of Co-op City. But throughout all the tests of endurance and ability in these auditions, he shows himself so capable that they offer him the Running Man. They being Dan Killian. Now, in the first movie, the producer and show MC were one and the same, Damon Killian. But in this one, they are two different people like they are in the book, one being Dan Killian, the evil producer, and the other being Bobby T, the self-aggrandizing host. Now, this is a great dynamic, but I can understand why the original combined the two characters into one. In the old one, you can feel satisfied that this character gets his comeuppance. But in the new one, you don't like Bobby T and you hate Dan Killian, but spreading it between them creates less catharsis, in my opinion. Though, they could have ended it differently and given us the catharsis we were looking for. But we'll get to the disputed ending later. Dan, the producer, is a skilled manipulator and is able to manipulate Ben into doing the Running Man, even though in 30 years, nobody has ever won. This leads us shortly after into this new dystopian vision of the United States. This version is fiercely divided between the haves and have-nots. There doesn't seem to exist a middle class. You're either rich or you're poor. What I thought was really fantastic about this and made me want to read the book is that they just put him out into the world and he has to keep himself hidden from not only just the hunters, ostensibly the entire country. You see, they give rewards to citizens who identify him and bigger rewards for citizens killing him. This really adds an extra element of paranoia into the film as you never know who Ben can trust, which amps up the tension. He will meet people he can trust along the way, of course, eventually, even Michael Cera, because as is common in King's work, Ben ends up in Derry, Maine, with a conspiracy theorist style character, played by Michael Cera, who is living with his bloodthirsty mom. Now, this is probably 2/3 through the movie at this point, and I have been in it. Even with Ben's sometimes overdone anger, it's gotten me pretty hooked. But what happens with Michael Cera's character really kind of annoyed me and brought me out of it a bit. I don't want to give anything away or give any spoilers. There's just a decision made by Elton, Michael Cera's character, that just doesn't make any sense. They tried to cover it up with some backstory style motivation, but it didn't work for me and it really put me off. If they had just let his mom do what ended up happening, and he was like, fuck it, I guess we're gonna have to deal with this now, then fine. But that's not what they did, and I think it was the wrong choice. But after this moment, the action heats up, things start coming at Ben faster and faster, and leads to some great chase and fight sequences. I was still enjoying it, but the Elton bit was in the back of my mind. Either way, as we head toward the final showdown, we get some twists and turns that were decent, and ultimately we culminate in, well, I don't want to give any spoilers. I know there's a lot of discussion about this ending, and I'm unfortunately going to straddle the fence a little bit. This is what I'll say about it. What people are annoyed about with the ending is well-founded, but it's not a bad ending. It just isn't as good an ending as it could have been. But I'll leave it at that, and we can go to the rank and find out how it did.
A rank.
So the rank is where I rank the movie based on 10 categories: story, acting, originality, action sequences, film coherence, hero appeal, villain appeal / hatred, supporting character appeal, the final showdown, and my rank. I rank it on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best, all to find out what are the best action movies of all time. Now, before I dive into the rankings here, I just want to say if you're enjoying this episode, please do leave a like down below. Hitting that thumbs up really does help me out. But without further ado, let's dive in here. The first category is story, which I gave a 5. The story for this one is fantastic. I really enjoyed it. A guy, to help his wife and daughter have a better life, agrees to do a game show that is designed to not let him win. Action and world building ensue. So, good stuff. Let's go to acting, which I gave it 3.75. The acting was really good, but not great. I like Glen Powell, and I hope he can become a movie star, but I really do think the days of having movie stars is kind of over, as I've mentioned several times at this point. Rotten Tomatoes is the real movie star now, which is sort of sad to me. Anyway, I've already had this digression once, so let's go to the next category, which is original. originality. I gave originality a 2.75. I didn't go lower because I think it's unique enough from the original that it deserves to not have a low rating. That being said, it's still very similar to a lot of the dystopian style movies that we've had over the past 50 years. So let's go to action sequences, which I gave a 4.5. Well choreographed and tension filled. These scenes were well done and didn't ever feel like it was obvious that Ben would get out of it. So let's go to film coherence, which I gave a 3.25. There's really nothing super wrong with the coherence. I think they make some weird choices with the ending, but what really drove the score down for me was the ridiculous choice that Elton makes. That really stood out to me and is still bothering me. So let's go to hero appeal, which I gave a 3.75. Glen Powell certainly has charisma, but there was just something about Ben Richards that wasn't as appealing as it should have been. I mean, he was appealing. 3.75 is not a bad score, but like, he wasn't badass enough to be appealing in that way, and he wasn't scared enough to be appealing in that way. That being said, I still rooted for him, and it's not like 3.75 is a bad score. So let's go to villain appeal / hatred, which I gave a 4.35. Dan Killian is a great villain. Slimy and sleazy in a great way. It showed his power and corruption. It just never really felt like he was a real target in the movie. I think he could have been a 5 if there had been more of a chance that we see him interact with the hero outside of a screen. So let's go to supporting characters appeal, which I gave a 3.5. Elton was actually a great supporting character right up until his fateful choice. The hunters were decent. Bobby T was great. Ben's wife was fine, but not in it very much. There are a lot of supporting characters in this, and most were fun. Some were ho-hum, but more were good than mediocre. Amelia was kind of a weird one. Not terrible or anything, just kind of blah. It's probably Bobby T and Elton that saved this from being lower, even though I'm still annoyed at Elton. So let's go to the final showdown, which I give a 2.5. This is tough because there's two final showdowns here. One that is pretty fun and well done, cool fighting, decent choreography on a plane, and then there was one that should have been cathartic, but then wasn't. They had a real opportunity to have a badass moment here, which is what's really unfortunate. Ben says he's gonna do something near the beginning of the movie, and then we finally get to that moment and it just doesn't happen. So that's kind of a bummer. All right, so let's go to my rank, and I gave the movie a 4. I really liked this movie. I felt like it was much better than the first one. I liked that they followed the story of the novel more. It felt more tense because of it, and it gave you a real sense of the danger that Ben was in the whole time instead of one-liners and an action star that you knew would win. I'm not saying I don't like that other movie, the original, with Arnie, as you can go back and watch or listen to the ranking on that one that I did last week, but this one is definitely a better made film. So that puts the total for The Running Man at a 37.35, which puts it in the tier I'd watch it again. It ended up tied with The Incredible Hulk, which was just above Fire Down Below and just below The Accountant. And if you're ranking along with me, drop your score for this one in the comments. So thanks for listening and or watching. Now, if you enjoyed this week's episode and you'd like to see a list of our action movie rankings, you can do that on our website at therankpodcast.com. Please also remember to subscribe and or follow, like the episode, comment, or reach out to me directly via email at john@therankpodcast.com with any of your questions, comments, or suggestions. And if you super duper like it, consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/therankpodcast, where you can access all of our archived episodes. But that's it. So, 안녕히 가세요. Nope, I don't need to say this right now in the beginning, so gonna rewind.
He does this from time to time.